So we'll be going to the last session for today, and our next speaker will be Dr. Christiana Ngozi Kalis Idika from the University of Mainz, Germany. She'll be speaking to us on AI ethics in a dysfunctional system and the neoliberal tragedies, risks and challenges. Please, Dr. Christie, you can speak to us.
Okay, thank you, Amara, and thank for all the speakers. Is my voice clear? Because I have a little bit of cold, so
So sorry to hear that, but we can hear you.
All right. So you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So you can still see it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So in the next few minutes, I hope I'll be able to keep to time. Who is drawing on my stuff? So, okay, so and also AI ethics in a dysfunctional system, and then neoliberal tragedies, risk and chances. So it's a paper that is still in the developmental stage. So in the next few minutes, I'll just do the introduction. I make clarification of terms and scope. Then I will look at two major themes that I would like to discuss here. That is, first is the Africa vulnerable condition, making sense of the dysfunctional system. That is, what is this dysfunctional system about? Then I will look at neoliberal tragedies and then make some open-ended conclusions. So first, clarification of terms and scope. I propose a primary investigation on Africa's vulnerable condition. That means I'm not going to present a theory of vulnerability. But one thing that is clear is that ethics should be understood as a response to vulnerability. I will discuss that much later. Then looking at ASUSU's missing link and concealment, I will not be able to give you a comprehensive argument here, but I think he provides us also with ideas on how to understand vulnerability. And then vulnerability, according to how I defined it, is the primordial predisposition to being at the mercy of another or other factors. That is, being at the mercy of another person, another structure, system. So another here doesn't necessarily mean a human being. Another is just that it is not you, somebody else, something else, and other factors beyond one's control. So I am not also investigating a theory of risk. It's a huge field. So risk is knowing, simply knowing that it is possible that something may happen, but not certain that, so you know that it is possible, but you are not certain that some undesirable event will occur. So you are between knowing and not knowing, okay? So this knowing and not knowing is what make risk a kind of an interesting theme, not only in the field of data analysis or in the field of decision theory or in quantum analysis. The thing is that it's pendles between knowing, having this feeling that something might go wrong. Of course, we are not sure, but at the same time, we don't know exactly what may go wrong. Again, though working on system theory, that means I'm working on a system theory for social organization in African philosophy using Chimakonam's maze logic. The present paper will not go into it. So I present this functionality as a disintegration of the relationship between parts and the whole. In other words, using Chimakonam's maze logic as a springboard in proposing a system theory from the African philosophical perspective. In connection to that, I will see dysfunctionality, also dysfunctional system, as an aberration. That means when you look at the Ezumezu logic, and of course, other arguments that build up to it, and you look at the reality in the African context, definitely you will see that there is an aberration. So an aberration of such a system of correlation, cooperation, complementation, and relationship, that is these whole factors or principles that build up the system itself. So then let's look at Africa vulnerable condition and making sense of the dysfunctional system. I will first give an idea of this functional system by just saying one or two things that Chimakonam said. So he said Ezume's logic 2019 does not only serve for thought, that is my claim. So it doesn't serve for thought, but also it explains an intrinsic and at intrinsic and cognitive level, a system theory that incorporates human beings as intricate part of a functional system, and particularly in the present context. So in what I'm doing with system theory, I have to place this idea of Chimakonam's Ezumezu logic to those system theory that are more or less functional, that is seen as machines, or where the human person that is anti-humanist, like the German Luhmann, who argued whose system theory didn't incorporate the human person as a living being, as an interactive aspect of the system. And why this is important for what we are discussing today is because AI technology is all about machines. So no matter the way we look at it, these algorithms that have been added up to build up, they are all machines, and it is also a system. So when you think of a larger society as a system and an AI as a system, you begin to see the faulty foundation of those who look at human beings as also wired in the way the system is wired, like the AI. But that is not our focus in this paper. So Chimakonam said that thought system is the metaphysical characterization of that worldview which describes the reasoning trend in a given culture. Okay, so that is the thought system. So then he argues that Ezumezu logic means the collective. But this collective, they do not lose their independence. They do not lose their autonomy. They don't lose their identity. But they are also within that frame of identity, they are also functional in the collective. So he referred to one aphorism when he said that Ezumezu explains the aggregate of all. Okay, so now we'll come back to this much later. So there are two forms of dysfunctionality now in African social system. Namely, one is an aberration. That is aberration. In other words, this thought system that is the metaphysical characterization of the worldview of the Africa, okay, that shapes, that should shape the system, that should shape the connection between the people in the system, okay, but it's not functioning. Something is wrong somewhere. So the reality doesn't collaborate with the theories that is emerging from the African context and African philosophical system. Then dysfunctionality as the disintegration of the metaphysical edifice that supports the system. That is the same thing as what I just explained earlier. And then we'll have to look at the other form of dysfunctionality, which is related to neoliberalism and the tragedies associated with it. I tried to, create something. I didn't want to, I don't know how many of you have read Chima Konam's Ezumezu Logic. So where he had to, draw this diagram where you have the context in the middle and you have the complementarity up and you have the relationship down. So he was talking about Meko, Njiko, and Ononititi. If you look at this diagram, no matter how you posit it, it will still take the same shape. So you look at this, you take this as a triangle, and you take this as a triangle. You take this. So I didn't, because there wouldn't be more time for me to do that. What I'm trying to do in this diagram, which is not yet perfect, is that for every of these institutions you see here, legal institutions, economic, social, political, security, all of them all of them have that three components. And that three components is complementarity, relationship, and then, of course, context. When you look at the middle, you will see the government, groups, family, individual, which are the key things that, that ground the system. Every other of these institutions and structures are directed towards the promoting the relationship, the complementarity, and the context of each individual, each group, each family, and each country in the first place. So to be able to promote the principles that most African philosophers are arguing about, that is that this communal thinking, this idea of personhood as an integral part of the community.
Okay, sorry,
so I'm not sure that
you have 5 minutes more, please.
Oh, okay. So the current state of dysfunction makes citizens vulnerable to crime, misuse of AI technologies for fraudulent and questionable activities. It makes Africa in general to be vulnerable to global policies that in some cases are unfriendly to Africans' safety. Okay, so, and then I said system dysfunction is also evident in the workings of AU and sub-regional agencies, whose aim is to provide leadership anchor at the continental and sub-regional levels. There are a lot of current papers and resolutions, okay? Somebody talked about it earlier today. 4 of them. I'm not sure how many of you have read it, but in all of them, they are always talking about human rights, human dignity, human rights, human dignity, human rights, human dignity. So the document proposed a regulation of governance that is responsive to potential harm. The idea of potential harm is associated with the notion of risk. The bigger risk is not the risk we know or can imagine, but that the intensity, the scope, and probability is also unknown. Scope, according to Bostrom, means the size of the group of people that are at risk. Intensity means how badly each individual in the group will be affected, and probability means the best current subject estimate of the probability of the adverse outcome. So human rights are employed to reduce vulnerability. Neoliberalism as an unrestricted liberalization of market economic forces, free trade, state, non-intervention, non-interferences, and emphasis on the creation of profits. Okay, so and that is going to bring us to the fact that neoliberal values are mostly Western-centric. And we cannot deny that there is market forces behind AI technology. So in a dysfunctional system and in a market economic mindset, is Africa ready to negotiate its terms on AI importation, production, and conditions of partnership proposed by the papers coming from AU and her agencies? If funding is provided by multinational companies and companies that produces these AI technologies, or states in the global north, or even China, can Africa negotiate its norms and values in relation to AI? So my claim is that the dysfunctionality disposes Africa to be so vulnerable. And that vulnerability is what any ethics of AI in Africa should address. Not just the vulnerability of abuse, of violation of human rights, but that the fact that the system that should enforce those ethics are not in place. They are dysfunctional. So thinking of the future before us, what are the chances for Africa to maintain their norms and be open to AI technologies? Okay, I'm not sure if you got anything within the few minutes I had. I have to stop. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chrissy, for this wonderful lecture. Thank you. So since Okechukwu is still not here with us, maybe he had an unexpected emergency. So the floor is open for questions, for engagement. Please, if you have any, kindly raise your hand up and I will call you. Okay, Dr. Chrissy, like I just need a clarification,
Okay.
on this. I know you explained it, but I need a little more clarification on this dysfunctional system that Africa has and how it's, limits the role that Africa play, let me say, in the world technopolitics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy that it came up again as a question. The dysfunction, like I said, you have to see it in two levels. One is in the relationship between the institutions themselves. So the social institutions, which includes educational institution, health institution, religious institution. So you think of the relationship between the political institution and the economic institution in relation to this social institution, the support they are getting, because these institutions should complement each other. These institutions should have a relationship with each other. These institutions should also look at the context of the individuals, the groups, and the families within the system, which is not happening, not simply because of corruption, but because of greed, because of this aberration that I'm talking about. Because if at all we say that we are communally, I argue for communal-centric ethics, if we argue that the human person is at the center of African ethics, and if we argue that what supports Africa is these three principles, and in reality, it is not happening. Even there is no accountability with respect to elections, or when you talk of supporting, providing funds for education. And you see that it is not functioning. So the health system is not functioning. The educational system is not functioning. When you look at education, somebody talked about generative AI, which has created laziness. People just type something and this AI generates it for them. People cannot sweep their houses. People cannot do anything more. People cannot read. They Google, whatever Google give them, they supply. So, and in Africa, because of the lack of fundamental human integrated approach to technology in the universities, in the schools, where children are from the beginning taught how to, have a human touch to, technology. It creates a dysfunction even from that context. So by dysfunction, I mean that the collapse of the key institutions, and which are affecting the sub-institutions.
Very much for your response. Please, this is time for question engagement. Let's come up with something to make this section very interesting. So, Dr. Chrissy, I'm so happy that in your response you mentioned the role of Africans, the role they play in this dysfunctional system. And I'm wondering, do you think that this dysfunctional system also contributes to the brain drain that Africa is facing as regards to the context of AI?
Of course, I will say yes. I will say yes, because when you think of some of these guys that are outside and doing great in the field of AI, and that they don't have the resources, not even necessarily payment or salaries, but that they can't function. They themselves cannot function. So they feel like, they are wasting. It's like a wastage of human capital, So instead of wasting away, they have to move out. So the dysfunctional system is also affecting the brain drain, that people are moving away where they can, be resourceful to themselves, not only in terms of not only economically, but as well as, feeling, realizing themselves and what they want for their lives.
So much. Please, do we have any question or any contribution from the participants for Dr. Chrissy? Okay. In the absence of none, I think we have come to the end of this colloquium. Okay, we'll have one person. Boniface, please kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Mine is not a question.
Okay.
But I'm very, very pleased. I'm a Catholic priest. I see that she's a nun, I think. Sister, I'm very impressed with your presentation. And the way you look at our societies that are maybe dysfunctional. I was wondering whether you are reflecting on what can make our kind of, systems function at least for once. What is it that we are supposed to do as Africans? I think listening to Jaja, she was saying she was more or less like, suggesting that as if there isn't much that we can do, but I have a feeling, I don't know what you think, of drastic measures that Africans can take for themselves without waiting for the global players and the people from the West always to tell them what to do. Whether that is possible, maybe we are dealing with extremists, but people like Gaddafi, they had the idea of having Africa, the African, more or less like an African kind of, system of government that is one, right? That is united and all that. So that, you can have products made, whether it be AI or whatever, all those things, could actually be be even made here in Africa, it may take centuries, but it's possible to get there. Not maybe not necessarily centuries, but I think it requires a lot of determination and a lot of sacrifice. And the issue of sacrifice sometimes for us maybe doesn't come so much. We wanted to make gains today, if not yesterday, that leads to a lot of corruption and a lot of cooperation also with the entities that disadvantage us. So I don't know what is your comment on that one. Thank you, sister.
Okay, so thank you so much. Personally, I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic anyways, but it seems that way. Especially, I mean, individuals can do things, especially in the face of neoliberal theories, where neoliberal laws gives you an openings where you can, do something on your own. These days, if AI is not just a technology, it is also a business, So, and because it is a business, there is this freedom given to some of the companies so long as they cooperate with the regulations. But the problem is, are we sure that they are cooperating with the regulations? Because it is money that is speaking in this context. Now, when you look at Africa, my reluctance, to think of what we can do, because AI is not just your small business. AI is something global. AI is something relational. AI is not something you do on your own, you know? So long as it has something to do with others, when you think of the crimes that are even being committed with it, people can clone your face and your voice and tell somebody to give them money and do something. A lot of things are going. If there is no regulation, enforced regulation, that is a regulation that is enforceable, and that the people who are making these regulations, the committees, have the will to implement it, whether at the global level or at the continental level. I'm not sure if I have any adequate answer to give, and that's why I thematize this topic. That is why it became for me a huge concern, because I've thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Only change in this dysfunctional system can bring any change, and that change must be political. It's not something that's going to be theoretical. It's not something that philosophers are going to be on their armchair and theorize, right? So it's something that must happen as a political change, a political transformation. But that doesn't mean that it's going to stop the AI advancements in the way it is encroaching into Africa. Unfortunately, the human beings in Africa, most human beings, a good quantity of human beings, don't have the human touch, the wisdom, to deal with the encroachment of this technology into Africa through different means. So for me, education, beginning from private universities who still, private schools, nursery, primary, secondary, who still have respect for human person, and churches, religious institutions that still have respect, to begin on time to inject into that system the necessary morals that should be associated with the use. Then once we have done with that, we can now think of the production and importation.
Thank you very much for your response. Thank you for your lecture also. So we have come to the end of this colloquium. We want to say thank you to all our speakers for their thought-provoking lectures. Thank you to the Conversational School of Philosophy, Calabar, Nigeria, and the Center for Phenomenology in South Africa, University of Fort Hare. Thank you to all our audience for your critical engagement. Thank you, and do have a nice morning, afternoon, and evening.